Won't be here. Stonebarger won't be here. Everybody else is here.
Wouldn't be, but
So we have 1,
Six.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'd like to call to order the Wednesday, October 7th, 2015 Watertown Board of Adjustment meeting. Roll call, please.
Dolly,
Here.
Stein,
Here.
Hanson,
Here.
Shriver,
Here.
Bill Johnson is absent, McGuire. Here. Arnold. Albertson is absent, Stonebarger is absent. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Before we get the agenda started, I'd like to welcome Jason Hanson onto our board and thank Rhonda Dargitz Johnson for her service on our board also. First item on the agenda is the approval of the 9/24/2015 minutes. I need a motion and a second.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. McGuire was a second by Mr. Arnold.
Yep.
All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Second item on the agenda is applicant Janice Tate, permit number 16380, appealing the terms of the zoning ordinance as it applies to her property at 292 Arizona Avenue.
Yes, again, this is applicant Janice Tate. Application was submitted requesting construct a non-conforming 280 square foot, 14 by 20 foot unattached garage on a 7,920 square foot parcel, and the said structure proposed to be constructed 5 foot from the rear north property line where 20 foot is required and 5.5 feet from the side east property line where a minimum of 6 foot is required. What's going on here is actually Mrs. Tate came in last year and pulled a permit to replace some doors and windows in this garage right here. And Mr. Dahlgren went out and started looking at it and says it's in such bad shape it's not worth redoing. It's got a good concrete pad that's still existing here, and now what they're hoping to do is just to tear it down and rebuild it back to the exact same size and the exact same spot. Legally, I could have went out and condemned this thing and let them rebuild it just as it is if I would have wanted it. The only thing is it's a single slope type roof, and of course, if they're going to redo it, they want to put a hip roof on it so at least it'll drain water and be right. I can show you what the existing building looks like a little bit here if nobody's had a chance. This is, of course, that's the existing garage there and there, and this is the general proposal what they're hoping to do. So, she's talked to both of her adjacent neighbors. They both signed consent forms that they'd be happy to oblige with this. Nobody's contacted us with regard to anything against the construction as proposed. Mrs. Tate is here if you have a question.
Thank you. With that, I'll open the public hearing if anyone's here to speak on behalf or against the permit. Ken, I have one question. You made a comment that if you condemned it, if you went out and condemned it, they could then rebuild it in its exact same spot without having to come to us?
That's correct. But it has to still be built as it was before.
Same
Slope
same
roof.
look. Okay. One of the questions I have for Mrs. Tate, first question is, we have a 6-foot setback on each side, and what we try to do is we try to sunset some buildings as you get older buildings that are being rebuilt. In a perfect world, the building would be moved over, 4 to 6 feet, which would require you to pour a little more cement, more than likely to slide it over.
Well, we're just hoping that we can have it grandfathered in. The original structure was built in about 1950. My parents bought the lake property and then turned it from a lake cabin into a lake home by having more additions built. And it's just, we want to just be able to store our jet ski and our lawnmowers in it and put a garage door on the north side. And like I say, this has been there since 1950. And Arizona Avenue is just a little dirt road. I don't know that'll ever be paved or whatever, and we're not trying to increase the size of anything. We just want to make the roof line architecturally compliant with the roof line of the house.
When the water runs off that roof, as it moves toward 290 Arizona Avenue, does it run back toward the gravel road?
Well, it's
Because now right now the roof runs toward it, but with the new roof, the new pitch on the roof.
the new pitch on the roof will look like.
Yeah, right now it does. The roof sheds towards the road. Okay, so the new one would shed actually to the east and to the west.
And then toward the road? I just look and go that,
It'd be to the east and west, yeah.
So what you may, if you decide to pass this, you might tell them they need to do it with no overhang and a gutter that would
Yeah.
force the water back to the road.
My contractor Keith Dolan is here, and he understands that the property lines is just so close. As you can see, the property line of 292 cuts into our neighbor Margaret Hofick's house. That's how weird these property lines are, and they were just, back in the 50s, I guess it didn't matter. But
oh, we're just sharper now.
But we just simply want to be able to keep the same concrete slab, build everything according to code with the latest materials and up to code, and just be able to use it as a storage building.
Ken, what's the largest move-in building, shed, we call them, that you can have moved in?
200 square feet.
Which would be, this one's,
Well, you can move in up
this
to
one's
the
80.
largest-
No, but I mean, that we call a garden shed,
Yeah,
utility
it's
shed.
200
So this
square
is
feet.
about 80 square feet bigger than what that would be. And how close can those get to the lot
4
line?
foot.
So those can get 4 foot to, so a shed bought on 212 can be moved in within 4 feet. We require 6 feet on this one, and she's at about a half a foot. Anyone else have any other questions? Anyone else here to speak on behalf or against the variance? With that, I'll close the public hearing, ask for a motion and a second for discussion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Arnold,
Second.
second by Mr. Dolly. Further discussion?
No, I would just a comment. You know, I certainly understand why you'd want to do it, and I think it's a great idea. You know, you need a garage, you've got a garage there, why repair something that's broken down and you throw money down a rat hole? Isn't that the old saying or something like that? You might as well fix it up and have a new one. And you want to make the roof line match the existing house, which is going to look nicer too. I mean, that's what we'd like to see happen, so I think it's very reasonable.
Do you want to modify the motion in regard to the overhang and gutters?
I suppose we should.
Because the
for
overhang would
protection of
actually be
neighbors.
on the other person's property
Right,
then.
yeah. You understand what he's asking there?
Keith, you okay with that? It's possible to do? That way we keep the water not moving onto that other person's property.
Just like building a pole barn in a sense, they cut the rake of the roof off, you got a 2x6 elevation, your gutter hangs on that.
Yep.
Okay. You okay with that in the motion? Second was by
Yep.
Blake, you okay with that? So we'll add to that motion, no overhanging gutters on that side. No overhang with gutters on that side as to not intrude on 290 Arizona Avenue as far as carrying the water from that roof. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Third item on the agenda, Shannon and Kim Mose, permit number 16381, appealing the terms of the R1 zoning, and the address for that is not on here. 718 Door Avenue.
All right. Second item, this is application for building permit number 16381. Owner applicant is Shannon and Kim Mose. The address is 718 Door Avenue. Application was submitted requesting to enlarge a non-conforming single-family dwelling by raising the building to create a new non-conforming 864 square foot lower level with non-conforming wraparound decks and a 256 square foot enclosed porch on an R1 zone parcel. Said lower level proposed to be constructed 3.4 feet from the side east property line where a 6 foot is required, a 0 setback from the side east property line where 6 inches required for the deck. Furthermore, applicant seeks to construct a non-conforming 1,008 square foot, 28 by 36 unattached garage on a 7,972.5 square foot parcel. Said structure proposed to be constructed 3.8 from the west side property line where 6 feet is required, and 5.8 from the east property line where 6 foot is required. Staff finds that there is sufficient buildable area on the 7,972.5 square foot parcel to construct a ordinance compliant garage up to 1,036 square feet, 24 by 43 without variances. There's also sufficient buildable area for the compliant property. Primary structure lifting the house provides the opportunity to adjust the position of the 24-foot wide structure to comply with current height and placement requirements, therefore negating the issue of enlarging a non-conforming structure. 33.8 feet of the 37.5 feet lot was proposed to be paved, leaving a 4 foot for grass boulevard tree. If application is endorsed, the board may consider fulfillment of boulevard structures. I guess the best thing on this thing is actually to look at the site plan. How to get that out. Put it on the overhead. This was public notice. All public notice requirements have been met. I have been contacted by all 3 of the adjacent landowners. With issues on this, I believe they're here to speak on their own behalf. If they're not, I will. This stupid thing. Middle of my picture. There we go. This is the existing house, of course, as you see right there. First of all, if they want to lift this house to meet FEMA requirements and just elevate it to the floodplain, it's okay to do it as it is right now. No issue. That's allowed by our ordinance. They are proposing to lift it to bring it to FEMA floodplain compliance and then add another story. With the increase of the cubic content of the building, that's the part that you guys are now here to speak about on behalf of. And then also in general, just the garage floor in itself too, or the garage in itself too, so. Mr. Moe is here to speak.
With that, I'll open the public hearing if anyone's here to speak on behalf or against the permit.
You're first.
Oh, I'm first, okay. Again, I'm Shannon Mose. Appreciate the time and consideration. Again, things have changed over the last several months of what we could and could not do on this property. And after several discussions up here with City Hall and our builders, contractors, designers, things have changed about 3 or 4 times. I've mentioned this to my neighbors probably back in early spring of what we would like to do. And like I said, things have changed considerably at this time. From pushing the existing dormer sides out to increase the usage of kitchen and family space to raising it now out of flood zone. And it was brought to our attention, instead of just building the dormers out, you're not really increasing your square footage, just your flat wall space. And obviously, if you guys have, I'm sure you all know about the A-frame, it lacks storage space, lacks no closets, no kitchen space. I literally got, or I should say my wife has, about 2.5 feet of counter space to 3 feet of counter space to prepare meals on and everything like that. So we thought about getting a flat wall space there to expand our kitchen. And that's when it was suggested to us by the builders, since we're raising it anyway, to add that extra level of floor space underneath so we can have extra family space, kitchen and family space. One of the things is I know that we are only 3.5 feet from Janet. I did get an opportunity to show Janet on Monday. I went over there and we probably discussed it for about an hour and a half of issues, but we had finally at least saw the floor plan of what it's actually going to look like. And the same thing with Leslie and Conda. I do have a signed letter from Conda Williams and Leslie Topkin of agreeing to what's being proposed on our property. I know Janet's here and she'll speak on her behalf of against the house But I will tell you, I could understand Janet's position we're in. I understand too that many years ago, that whole property down there all along the row, they all used to be cabins and were strictly made for cabin usage, and that's it. Over time, people have bought cabins. I understand that in our A-frame right now and in Janet's house, there used to be two brothers who lived next to each other. And from what I understand is the brother in the A-frame, our property, gave his other brother, Janet's house, some land so they can build the current ranch house on that property. Janet's got 9 feet from her house to her lot line, whereas I'm at that 3.4, 3.5 feet it is. Unfortunately, I'm not related to Janet, otherwise we might not have this issue, and we could build it as is. But, you know, we're not, and that's where we come before the board. I guess in our position, it makes total sense for us. We can't change the 3.5 feet at all. Right now, she's looking at basically our side of our roof line right now on the A-frame, and some roof shakes on part of that dormer that's built out. If we're raising it anyway, I understand I have to put a retaining wall all the way around the foundation of the house, fill in our 3.5 foot crawl space now to bring it up to flood elevation. While we raised it, you know, we're gonna raise it and maybe hopefully add another 9-foot wall there so we can have more kitchen and family space for our family for many years to come. Our position is to turn this in not only to a cabin now, sell the house in town, and live out here permanently. Since March, we've probably only spent about 10 days in our house in town, and this is where we would like to be for the rest of our lives. So you can tell by if you've seen the floor plans, you know, maybe it's too much for a 38-foot lot. In the same sense, when it's hopefully to be our final resting place and our families for many years to come, we look at it, that's really not a non-issue for us. The other things I've talked to Janet about too, and I know that she had Darwin Brinkman go out there yesterday and basically resurvey the things so we know exactly where the lot lines are. And I went out and I took pictures of it on my phone this morning. I understand Janet's frustrations over the last 21 years. Like she said, she's been there. There's not a whole lot of room. There's a currently sidewalk right alongside of our house, and if you don't use the sidewalk, anybody coming down the South Lake Drive sidewalk is walking down her property to go towards the prop at all times. I'm guilty of it too, whether it be taking trees down in our tree removal guys. I told them not to go towards the lakeside with their equipment. They ran over a couple sprinkler heads. I took care of that right away. And I brought my boat across her property too, and I didn't quite understand her frustrations with it, but I do now after talking to her Monday. And that's something hopefully we can remedy once we get the house lifted and the walls put up here. She brought up about putting a fence in between the property lines, and I said that would be fantastic. I would even pay for half the fence and half of Darwin's fee if he charged or anything to come out there along the line. Basically, we do whatever we can to make this right. This is a place where we like to be and make the house permanent instead of just the cabin, and whatever we need to do to make it right with Janet, to make everything right. I even offered to buy those extra couple feet back, but I can understand why she wouldn't want to sell it to me either. But in the same sense, we just want to make sure we're great neighbors to everybody and have many years of a great family life out here so we can all enjoy the lake.
Sounds good. Any questions?
I do have one more thing
For-
to say. I'll just say about the water issues. Right now, there's nothing on the A-frame right now. There's no overhang on the A-frame whatsoever. It comes right down, right inside the sidewalk. You can see the point. There's no overhang there whatsoever. I know on Janet's house, there's no rain gutters on her house either in between the property or Leslie's side right now. So the rain comes down, it sits right in between our yards, and that's where it is. There's nothing to take that water or snow melt away like this. While we raise the house, if you've seen pictures of it, the roof is in dire need of new shingles. When we do raise it, I will be putting gutters on the sides of the house, going down to the downspouts, PVC pipe, whatever like this, which will carry that away from the property line and towards the lake, or back there towards the street side. Whatever we need to do, just water near foundation is never good, and I think we need to do that just to carry that water away.
Thanks. Any questions for
I got one. Is
Mr. Mills?
when you put the downspouts on there, is that gonna be tiled out? It won't be, the downspouts where the rain will come down, will that go underneath the ground and out?
Well,
Like the PVC pipe going
the
underneath?
yes, correct. That part should be underneath, how I got it envisioned in my head anyways. I mean, I'm not gonna have 40 feet of a rain gutter going from the edge of the house all the way out to the lake or something like that. With the proposal here of building out with the retaining wall, how we have to build it out around the foundation here and around the proposed 3-season room someday is from the house where it comes off the edge of that. That'll be approximately, 16 feet of that, and then the wood deck on the other side of that. That will be all buried underneath that flooring to go out towards the lake like that. So it'll be kind of, yes, it'll be underground, so to speak.
I don't know that I'd make that mandatory though. Sometimes if he's gonna build that retaining wall around there, it might be better off just sloping the ground accordingly to get it to drain away. That PVC pipe will freeze, and then you're at the mercy of the whatever is gonna go anyway. So, but not to reject it, but not make it mandatory.
The retaining wall, will that be on the lot line? Right on the lot line?
Yeah, it will.
How,
I mean, I
how
don't know.
tall will the retaining wall be?
Well, I had Marty.
I want to speak into that. No, it may not be. Typically, we've tried to hold those retaining walls back at least a foot so the water can flow between the properties back and forth whenever it's one side or the other. I haven't seen the final plan, but that's still going to be subject to approval. That might be what he wants, but it might not be what's accepted. We'll be looking at a lot of different things when I make that determination, whether we're meeting all the frost requirements and everything else.
And so when it comes to putting that retaining wall up and exactly where it's at, that's something that you'll handle in your office
Yes, I
yourself? Okay. One other question for Ken. The deck is subject to the setback, is it not?
Pardon?
The deck is subject
Oh,
to the
absolutely,
6-foot
yeah.
setback. Any deck that's attached to a structure is it?
Is considered part of the structure,
Uh,
so.
Okay, I want to make that clear
And
too.
I
So
want
it's a
to-
zero,
I'm
it's a
sorry.
zero. With that deck there, it's not a 3.4 foot setback, it's zero.
Is there any doors on the sides?
No.
I mean, so the purpose of the deck is just so you can walk from the front to the back.
Correct. Right now, there's a sidewalk going down there from basically part of the house, right on the lot line again. So as we add the garage, we're gonna have that sidewalk run up to that deck because it's gonna be elevated now, that you'd have to walk up steps onto that deck level to walk on the side of the house to get lakeside. That's why we thought the deck would be the best way. We thought pavers would be fine too, putting it in the retaining wall, between the retaining wall and the house. We would even go little pavers or something like that, but we do have a friend that is in a wheelchair, and when they come to the house, you can bump her up obviously on that decking so she can wheel out towards the lake. That was our thought there with the decking.
I think through the house is a better path.
Yeah.
So I talked to Jill about this a day or two ago. I was under the understanding that if the deck was not more than 6 inches off the ground, that it would not require a variance, so that it would.
Right, then it's not constituted as a deck, it's constituted as a
Okay,
patio.
but the way that this
patio or
is right,
sidewalk.
the way that this is presented, it does require
Yeah,
a
this is
variance
presented to be
because
like
it's
eight to
raised.
12
yes.
feet off the ground.
Right.
So the deck's on the second level or the first level?
I should
Oh,
have.
no, it's only,
Yeah, I had Marty Mack
this is
come
gonna
out
be your
there.
first level, not the second level.
Yeah,
So it'll be level with the first floor?
I had Marty Mack come up there to raise it. I have to be 2 feet 10 inches above what we're lifting the house. So the retaining wall block, and I'm looking in between the house here and the lot line, that retaining wall block pathway where we can walk beside the house to get out to the lake should probably be roughly maybe that 4 foot or so, 4 to 5 feet high is that retaining wall on that side. And that's what we need to take the step up to walk alongside the house to get towards the lakeside.
Well,
Right? I'm not looking
I've
at
got
no
a
8 or
question,
9
Pat.
feet.
Shannon,
Yeah.
when you and I talked on the phone, when you called me, a couple of things we talked about, I was just curious if you had considered those anymore. You've got a narrow lot.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was a lot intended for a cabin originally, and now you're wanting to turn it into a full-time, year-round residence. Trying to make it so it's not so impactful upon your neighbors on either side, you could build your garage 25.5 feet and be within compliance on both sides, and you would not need a variance for your garage.
Correct.
On your house, since you're gonna raise it and add to it anyway, if you move it over, you would be 5.2 feet from each of your property lines, that would be 8/10 of a foot you would need a variance for. So you could have everything you want, and you would only be asking for 8/10 of a foot on each side of your house. Now, any consideration of that?
How about, so in other words, you're suggesting to
Right, and we talked
dig
about
and-
lengthening your garage, you know, if you're gonna lose 1.5 feet on the width, put another
Yeah.
foot on the end of it.
Yeah, for the, I know that's why Leslie's kind of proved that. She said she was fine with the 3.8 feet, which would be good with the garage. The house, I'll be honest with you, just for the expense of it, to dig more footings, et cetera, like that, we just felt this was the easiest way to go. I mean, here again, whether I move it over, I mean, I don't know what the difference is. Look at a house if it's this close to you or that close to you, and that's what I asked Jenna. We were just using the existing foundation just to go straight up, and that's it. So I wouldn't incur any more expenses, and I thought it was an easy solution, to be honest with you, just go straight up instead of pouring more footings around the house and adding more to that side and not really pushing the house over that way to the west.
What was your thought then on the point that Dennis was making as far as making the garage narrower and deeper? You could still have the same square footage, and a 24-foot garage, 24-foot width garage would be a standard double wide garage. So candidly, what you're asking for is a wider than normal garage on a 37.5-foot lot.
Correct. Reason for that is just, I've been in a lot of houses, a lot of garages, obviously, over the time. 24-foot is, to get two vehicles in there, fairly narrow. Doesn't give you a whole lot of walking space in between the cars when you open the car doors, or the wall space when you open up your car doors. Here again, lack of space, trying to downsize from in-town to out-town, out there at the lake, just to add that extra couple feet there, so we have a little bit more storage space for snowblower, lawnmower, bikes, et cetera, like that. That's why we requested the 28 feet wide. Actually, to be honest with you, our original plan started at 30 feet wide. And then I heard Janet did not like the setback issues like this. So we went back with the builders and proposed from a 3-stall garage, skinning it up to 28 foot they thought would be fine. And I said, I'm fine with that. Basically, we just want to make sure everything's all in compliance and everybody's happy with it.
Ken, on that three-season porch, how far is that from the front lot line?
That actually, the dimension of 6 foot is for the 3-season porch, so the 3-season porch does meet the setback requirement.
So it's, how far was it? No, but I mean front to back, to the front yard
Oh,
setback.
to the front yard? Well, the ordinary high water mark down there is 46.3 feet from
Okay.
the property line.
Okay,
plus
I didn't
he's got-
see that.
so, yeah, he's got lots of room that way. You could probably go another 30 feet that way if you wanted to.
If anyone else is here to speak on behalf in the public hearing, please,
Pat,
go ahead.
engineering. It's not my nature to pile on to the concerns of a project like this, but one thing, I do see a certificate here from his surveyor, Marty Mack. Not sure that that's this property and the issues have been brought to our staff for review of floodplain issues. I would like to at least have an opportunity to maybe briefly look at it with my staff and make sure that the mows don't create a problem for themselves, especially when it comes to insurance and things going forward. So I would like that opportunity just to make sure that they're safe.
Well, but that generally falls after, once these guys approve it, we
Right,
still gotta
right.
get through our
Yep,
building process.
that's what I'm
and
just
everything
making
else.
that point,
Yep.
that should be reviewed as well. You know, I understand that you're raising the existing structure up. I mean, I do have some concerns about putting a lower level underneath it that should be reviewed, so we'll work with you on reviewing that, okay?
Okay.
So any motion will add to that motion that the engineering staff would like to review it due to the raising of a home. Fair enough? All right, now is anyone else here to speak on behalf or against the permit?
Yeah, please.
Hi,
State your name, please.
I'm Janet Twiss, and I own the property on the east side of Shannon and Kim. And I believe I have talked to a number of the board members trying to express some of my concerns. A water issue definitely would be one of them. I've seen water issues before, and it is a concern how it's handled and where that drainage is going. A snow issue is another concern of mine. There's really, the snow comes through there terribly during the winter, and you know, where it's going and where it gets put and stuff is also a concern. And as far as the variances on the side of the lot lines, I think ordinances are put in place for a reason. There's a reason to protect the integrity of property and protect the neighbors that are to beside them. And I realize everything's close right now, but this lot was built for a cabin, designed for a cabin. And I have nothing against Kim and Shannon, and I understand they'd love to be there with a permanent residence, but I don't want it to be intrusive on my property. And I've put up with a lot of issues in the last 21 years of everybody using my property. And I understand why they're doing it. They have no way to help themselves. There's no way to move there. But I've had bobcats up and down there constantly. Yes, they tore out trees and broke the sprinklers and came through with boats. And I don't necessarily have a problem with, I understand there's people that visit, and for years people walk to the you know, the foot traffic probably is less now than it ever was, and that's not it. It's going through there with vehicles. I've replanted. The structure is too close the way it is, and I'm with Dennis. If you're gonna pick it up and lift it and raise it up anyway, move it over and get in compliance. There's a reason we have these rules. And a deck 0 feet from the lot line, to me, is just really crazy. Everything's too close the way it is. 37 feet just isn't enough to deal with this, so I do have a problem. I do wish he'd get in compliance, and like I said, I think there's a reason we have some rules.
Thank you. Any questions for Mrs. Twist?
Janet, of the proposal and the variance requests, as you look at it, is there anything that you're okay with as far as what they're requesting?
Well, no, I don't want that tall of a structure, and like I said, it's close enough already. So no, the 3.4 feet, I am not in agreement with. The 0 foot on a deck, I'm not in agreement with. And, you know, I think he can build and have a double garage and be in compliance there. Now, when he says Leslie signed a form, I'm a little bit caught off guard because I've talked to Leslie 3 times. And as of 2 days ago, she said she might have to work and couldn't be here, but she was opposed at that time, so I'm kind of surprised.
She signed it with me last night.
Last night? Yes. Because she called me 2 days ago too and really wanted the setbacks to be observed, but, so.
That's a tough part of this board because we get put into a position. It'd be real easy for us to just say no. The code says the code. We try to take the emotion out of it and make a decision, kind of liaison to try to wordsmith something that works for everybody. From this board standpoint too, we do look at the existing landowners, but we try to look out further than that and say, you know, we've had times when I've been on this board, Dennis has been on this board, when people have come in and opposed something that they signed for, but it was for a different neighbor at the time. A guy came in, allowed his neighbor to give him an easement, to find out the new neighbor came in, he didn't like him, and he wanted to not abide by the easement he signed with the old neighbor. So we try to look in the long run. As far as the height of the house, Ken, it's within code.
As proposed, it's within code. If he builds out like he does and puts the retaining walls in, then as he's showing it from the retaining wall, which would be their new ground height, it will be 32 feet on the primary
So
structure.
I was just making some notes of the opposition. One of them is the height. We can't control that necessarily.
If
We
it's
could,
less
we
than
couldn't, we
35
can't.
feet, it's by the ordinance.
Right, so, and that is something we are working on, an ordinance that's going to possibly limit the height of a structure based on the lot, the distance from the lot line, just for those reasons of snow. And we always try to say everyone has a right to air movement and sunshine and water, and when you build too close, that happens. Personally, I have an issue with the deck on the lot line. That's a lot. And I understand why you would want to do it, but I think,
Well, I'm not so sure that, I was misconstruing. I was thinking he was gonna try for the floor above, but if he's going for ground floor, he doesn't need a deck. I mean, he can convert that into a patio somehow from one to the other.
No, he could get because he's raising it up, so that first story is gonna be new.
But he's going to build a retaining wall, so that will actually be his ground level at that point. So I don't think he needs a deck, so I don't, yeah. I'm strongly against that part, just FYI, but I think he can work around it where he doesn't have to have it.
I guess what?
Well, if he raises the ground up and puts the retaining wall in, then the deck he wants to connect from one to the other is gonna be at ground level anyway. It doesn't really call for a deck. Then it'll be back to our 6-inch thing, and it's basically just a patio, which is.
so in a case by the drawing, the 3.4-foot setback, if that deck is, the assumption with this drawing is that the deck is not requiring a variance. So we could say you could put wood on a deck, but it's not really a deck, it's a path of some sort. They're not asking for a variance for their deck.
Well, I'm not trying to put words in Shannon's mouth, but I'm conceiving it now not to be actually a deck, but more to be a patio, whether it's made out of concrete
Correct.
or grass. Or
Correct, because as we look
wood.
at this,
As long as it's 6 inches or less, it doesn't require a variance or it needs to be done, so.
right, the variance is for the sidewall of the structure,
Am I
not for a
speaking out of
deck.
turn? That's correct, so.
So as
So
we
do not-
move
do
forward,
not
we're not,
variance a deck.
we're not variancing a 0 setback deck, we're variancing a 3.4-foot sidewall from the lot line. Everybody follow me on that one? Any other questions?
Ken,
In the
so
open?
regardless, he can go up in the air with this house, right? He can go
Well, he can
out of
raise
the
it.
floodplain.
He can raise it to 2.3 feet, Barney Mac says. Under our current ordinance, you can bring any non-conforming house into FEMA floodplain compliance without having to get a variance, so.
But where the variance comes into play is the addition,
Now, when he adds that other
Right.
floor, we're changing the cubic content on that building, and that very much needs your approval to do that.
You know, and Shannon and Kim both, you know, it's nothing, excuse me, personal or Janet either. I always try to, in any decision in life, I've always tried to put myself in the other person's shoes and try to think and feel how they would look at a situation. And I totally understand why you'd like to do this. The other side of it is, you still have a 37-foot wide lot that limits you in what you can do on it, and not to be so impactful on your neighbors. That's why I asked, with a little bit of compromise in the middle, you could probably have everything you wanted. It might cost you a few more dollars, but everybody on both sides would be happy, and you would get everything you want. And we don't have to really stretch the rules too far, where we've got houses sitting right on property lines. You know, now we're looking at 5.2 feet versus you can have 6. That's why I said that, and sometimes it takes a little compromise on both sides for everybody to walk away from the table happy. So that's why I said, like I said, it's nothing personal. I'm really not in favor of approving something that close to the line. We have gotten caught on some of those in the past, and beyond our control, we didn't approve them, but they got done by circumventing, going around the back door and getting it done, or maybe that's not a good way to say it, but I just hate to see that continued on these small lots, so that's where I'm at, I guess.
I'm with you, Dennis, you know, and from an accessibility standpoint too, it makes a big difference when that side yard is so small, trying to get any kind of equipment or docks or, you know, boats down that property line, it becomes a challenge. And then looking at the layout of the property, if you did shift that, you know, 1.5 or 2 foot to the west, it would make a big difference.
I kind of with Blake and Dennis, I I can see the house being moved. I'm okay with the garage like it is. If, you know, we've got one neighbor that's saying okay at 4 feet and the other one is given 4 inches, but that's just my opinion. Anyone else to speak in the open?
Can I just say one other thing?
Yep, go ahead.
The other reason too that we have not really wanted to push that over is the where the boathouse is right now. It's pushed over 4.5 feet into the housing space right now. Again, you know, our view out the A-frame is probably only maybe 8-10 feet anyway at the most. So by taking the house and sliding it over again that far, now the boathouse is coming in a couple more feet into your line. So I mean, really, as you're sitting in the house, you're going to be looking at the back end of your boathouse and not really truly seeing the enjoyment of the view out there at the lake. That's the other reason why we've never really thought about building over a couple more feet and pouring footings for that expense.
I think, yeah, I see what you're saying, but you kind of think too, well, that would be imposing on yourself rather than the neighbor. It's like,
One of the things that occurs
it's a hard
to me,
one.
yeah, one of the things that occurs to me is with the discussion here is many of the variance requests we get are necessitated by the fact that there are no other building options, no other viable outcomes. And when you talk about the garage, you can get the same square footage and in a standard width garage, again, not ideal, certainly. And with the house, you can do, you know, what you want with the house, admittedly, at additional cost, you know, to move it and stuff. But one of the limitations that we are guided by is we can't grant variances just based upon cost factors. And in this case, with some concerns with the neighbor or neighbors, perhaps a variance isn't the way to go. It might be modifying the plan to get where you want to get. Again, admittedly not ideal, but whether it falls into the area of this board approving a variance or not, I'm not entirely sure about that.
Thank you, Mark. Anyone else have anything to say before I close the open? Seeing none, I'll close the open, ask for a motion and a second for discussion. I'd recommend, I have to make a note too that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 members. The Board of Adjustment requires a yes vote by 5 members for passage. I'd recommend, Dennis, you make a motion. I think you've got something in your head that could possibly get 5 votes.
Can you ask Shannon a question, please?
Shannon, do you have anything else?
Yeah. Sorry about that. I just want to know, okay, if it sounds like maybe no one adding that bottom level, additional level to the bottom of the house. Now, is that something that, do I go through this whole process again? If you say no to the house, yes to the garage, is this all encompassing one? If you say no to the house, I stop at the house, but I can go forward with the garage then? Or do I have to start this whole process over again?
Can we take it in 2 parts? Can we break them? Can we take the? It's all been public notice. We could do the house in one part, garage in one part.
Shannon, if you don't add that bottom floor on your house, it's
Right.
not, you're not gonna be able to get the square footage you need to use it as a year-round residence, are you?
Well, that's, that's
Well,
going to be up for this, probably
Maybe,
a good
I mean,
discussion
you can only
between us.
answer, your wife's shaking her head no, and you're saying yes.
See?
I'm saying we're gonna make
We're gonna try to make this work no matter what. Is it just gonna be for Kim and I?
The options would be if we could break it in 2 parts, because we can make a motion and if it passes, you could either take it and do it that way, or do it within the ordinance without a variance.
Okay.
Meaning you could, if we say, okay, we're okay with the 2 stories, but it needs to be moved over, you can say, I looked at it, I'm just gonna go with 1 story and raise it straight up. And Ken, you said that's legal without a variance. So you have 2 options. You have the option of what we agree to, or you have 1 in the hand and 1 in the bush and you hold them both.
Okay.
One's taller, one's shorter, and we'll break it into 2 pieces so the garage can be done separately.
Yep, and let me just ask another question. Have you, on the existing house, have you looked at the foundation? Is that adequate, or Ken, do you know? Is that adequate that you can add another floor to it?
I don't
On
know
what you
what they
have
have
for
out
footings
there.
and foundation now?
We still need to look at it once it gets lifted, you know, hopefully it's not a trenched-in footing, because it would not allow for a second story. You know, hopefully it's something with the footing and thing. But the house was placed, I think I looked at the DOE record, and I believe it was 79 this was built. You know, so it's not all that old, you know, it's 25 years ago or whatever, so.
You know, if you're gonna, you know,
25 years.
His was built in 77. Mine was built in
Shannon, Janet, you know, if the structure's gonna stay in the place and you're gonna raise it up, you still got that, you're still not that far off the lot line, it's still the same thing. Is there any compromise at all that would be something you guys could talk about that'd be suitable for both of you? There's no fix here on this.
There's, Brian and I, Jan and I talked for probably a good 2 hours about it, and like I said, I understand the frustrations. To me, to me, I look at it, and it's no different if I raise another floor on it or not. I'm existing foundation, everything like that. I'm not going over to her side. I'm not going over to Leslie's side. I'm not moving forward with the house. I'm not moving backward. I'm just going straight up with it. To me, common sense, to me.
But if a new person came in and had bought that bare lot at 37 feet wide and wanted to build an A-frame on it,
Yeah.
3 feet from the property line, with it, just like it is now, we wouldn't approve that.
Correct, I understand that.
So that's what that's kind of where I'm coming from. The house needs to be over if at all possible.
Yeah. It's just trying to use what's existing and trying to make it more family-friendly, I guess you could say, for years to come for our entire family.
I understand why you'd want to get it out of the floodplain. I think that's a good decision to do that.
I'd like to just kind of chime in just a little bit, because when we did take the house down, we took the house down, Lonnie Davis took it down. Lonnie dug the footings in, you know, the groundwork he did for us. And at that time, we did put in the footings, and that was all inspected by the building inspector at the time, and they're in plenty thick. So I don't think there's any issue with that, and it's just normal 8-inch block that's going under it. But I'd also like to comment, how did you guys work out the narrow lot with the Hansons that built just down the street from these folks, about 2 blocks? And
They
when
built
I
with-
look at that, they're straight up. They hooked the garage on somehow, if I'm not mistaken. Is that something that Shannon or
They
you
sent-
guys could look at for
They
them?
centered the house on the lot.
They literally moved it over. They did move the footings. I didn't think they did that.
Well, the house, they started from scratch, though. They completely tore down the old house. The lot tapered in from the lake to the roadside. It met requirements on the south end of the lot, and the north end, now the primary house, was like a foot in. So they gave them like 5 foot on that end. And then when they built the garage, they come and requested a setback on that one too, and we told them no, and they made them stay at 6 foot on the sides for the garage. So
Yeah, the garage is compliant. They had come in, they wanted to move it over closer. The neighbor on the other side was opposed to it. They wanted to be able to store next to that.
But I
And
think,
it,
I think to your point, Steve, that variance was actually denied.
I think of all the issues we've had to deal with in recent months, that's been the one that more questions have been raised, and I've been asked more questions. How did that ever get done?
I agree with you.
Just
I
as
mean,
an
I didn't
example, I mean,
really-
that's people up and down the road can't understand that, how
Yeah.
they ever did that.
They actually think it looks horrible, the way it's in there and the height on it, and again, it's that small lot.
that whole side of the lake we've looked at for 20 years. We knew from the Y to the prop, it's a substantially low area. Our original concern 10 years ago was that it was going to turn into an RV park, that everybody would just tear their stuff down and bring in RVs, not pay property tax, and build a little gazebo and a bathroom, and if it gets flooded, it got flooded. But it's a tough one. That's one of the tougher areas we have in town, because we've got $1 million homes and cabins, and it's going to get real tricky when we have a flood, because everybody that's built up, some of that water, they're going to be safe, but we're going to have these little channels all over where the old homes are at. But that, that's just the evolution of an area, I guess. And we knew when these, between 27, a lot of those lots are 35 foot, 37 and a half. We knew that this is the toughest part of our job when they come in, because like I told Jason today, when being new, I said what's hard for us is people will come in and they'll have this dream of what they want to do. In a sense, they have blinders on with that, and then you've got neighbors, and it's really hard to tell people that, you know what, it's not going to work in this time and place or whatever. That's the part that the chicken dinner doesn't pay for, that we get every Wednesday, you know. But it's gut wrenching for us when we have to tell somebody, well, we'd rather have you see it different, because they have a view that it's tough. So with that, I'll ask for a motion in a second. Anybody want to make a motion?
Are you gonna, you talked about the two-part motion, you're gonna do this for the house?
You
and
want
then
to do
for
the garage first or the house first?
Okay, because I guess I would just say, in my opinion, that considering that Shannon and Kim can get the same square footage, again, not as convenient as a 28-foot wide width. Certainly, Janet is opposed to that. The other neighbor was opposed to it up until 2 days ago. I'm not sure what this note is here. I would lean toward the 24-foot wide garage, so it stays within compliance on the setbacks.
So you want to make a motion on the garage section of it to allow for a 24-foot. If you say 24 feet, will that meet the compliance on both sides? Yes.
Just as long as we're negotiating just a little bit. If you go 26 foot on it, then they're at 5.8. That only puts them 4 inches off on each side, which is pretty nominal, and it still gives them a couple extra foot.
Dennis, from a 26 versus something short of that, that's from a building material standpoint, that's going to be smarter with that. You want to change your motion to 26?
Okay.
Maximum width of 26 on the garage.
Am I running with this one? Okay. So the first motion then relative to the garage is 26-foot width. We don't need to talk about the depth, do we? 26-foot width. And is this the time and the place to talk about the green space with the trees and all that? Okay.
No,
and then compliance with the green space ordinances, is that?
Yeah, and they weren't asking for a variance from that.
No.
So the motion by
Myself, we're not asking for a variance.
Mr. Stein is to approve the garage at a 26-foot width and irregardless of depth.
I'll second that, but I want to ask a question with that. So that would put it 4 inches off both property lines then?
Right.
Okay, center of the garage. Okay.
Motion by Mr. Stein, second by Mr. Arnold. Any other discussion on the garage? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries on the garage. Ask for motion on the home. You want to make that motion, Dennis?
Well, we've talked about so many things here. What do we?
I think that,
I mean, I'll make a motion, the simplest one to answer, well, they don't even need a motion to raise it out of the floodplain.
right, that would, they're not asking for a variance to
given.
raise
There's
it
no variance for that.
for a one floor. So the variance they'd be asking for is to go 2 floors.
I mean, I'll make a motion to do what he wants to do and move it over, but I don't think
we'd
I
have the
don't think
votes to
you're
pass
willing to
that.
accept
Do we
that,
want, do you
so-
want to make a motion to,
as it stands.
no, as what you had said earlier, 5.2 feet or what it was, if it was centered on, if you moved it over?
That's,
what I,
if I make a motion, that's what my motion
Right.
would be.
I think that'll pass. It'll give them an option.
Okay, we could do it that way, unless you want to vote. Well, I guess if we vote on the other motion and it goes down, then it's dead.
And then he can
If
just
we vote
do,
on it this way.
at least he's have an
Go
option.
back and vote on the original motion then? On the
No,
original
we just
request?
modify the plan to say 5.2 feet from each
But-
lot
But you
line.
didn't want to do, are you willing to look at it that way, Shannon?
Yeah, so I mean, basically what you're saying, if that's the only alternative I have, would be to lift it and move it over so it's centered where I'm within somewhat close to compliance. And I said if that's the only option. I
So
would
if
have,
that,
I
if
would
that
vote for
motion,
something.
if that motion passes, you'd be able to walk out of here saying, I'm allowed to raise it,
You
but
can
it's
build
gonna
a
have to be in a
garage.
different spot, or I can just,
And I can do the level 2 and everything like that.
yeah, that's a 2-story home. Or I can just say, the heck with what they did, I'm just gonna raise it to meet the flood code requirements and deal with it. And you can
live with that.
You can digest that.
I don't know if Kim will, but I can. probably.
Right, well, let's do it that way then.
And no deck in the side yard.
Everybody's confused.
Well, correct. They're not asking for a deck on the side yard. If there's a deck in the side yard, it's gonna not be considered a deck. not part of a variance. It can be low enough where it's considered a path or whatever we call it.
Okay, then I'll make the motion, and the motion would be to let him go ahead and raise it up out of floodplain, which is a given already, and put a first floor, another floor underneath the existing structure, and center it on the lot, so it would be approximately 5.2 feet from each property line.
Okay.
A motion by Mr. Arnold, second by Mr. Dahl. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Compromise.
Is everybody kind of smiling?
Sometimes we do our job and everybody leaves unhappy.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. This is your copy, right?
Yep, that's
Okay.
all my fun stuff, so,
All right, thank you.
yep.
Next item on the agenda
Yeah.
is under old business.
Just one before we move on. Ken, what am I signing here that you passed around? Is this the original or is this the amended?
This is the amended. I don't have the notes on there yet, but they
Okay,
will be placed
that's what-
after I listen to make sure
You'll
I
make,
get them
okay.
exactly as stated, so.
Okay,
It will be the garage at 26 feet and centered on the property, and it will be the house as proposed, centered on the property with approximately 5.2 feet on each side. No side yard deck.
Next item on the agenda, under old business, Ken, item number 1. Is anyone here for item number 2? The property at 446 10th Avenue Northeast? Otherwise, I would do that one first, because the item number 1's going to take a little longer. But if no one's here on behalf of that, we'll just start with item number 1, Ken.
Oh, no, that's just gonna be me talking to you about it.
Oh, perfect. Can we do it over chicken?
We'll still get our chicken, yeah.
Okay, let's go item number 1. This is Four Seasons gas station, now known as Lake Stop 20. In regard to a storage building, that when this property was originally developed, there was included in the original plan was a storage building. And we asked for some drainage things. They went on and built the gas station, and now are coming back to talk on drainage.
Right, this has been a little while, so this has been done. You've gotten new revised maps that I've laid on your desk. The parties at this time also did make a little adjustment to the property. They wish to make the building slightly longer and slightly taller to accommodate bigger doors well, just to accommodate bigger doors. I don't think we're increasing the stalls at all, just making them bigger so they can.
Actually be less stalls.
Actually be less stalls, just a little larger. He also has in front of you the notes from Scott Engineering of what it would take to make that compliant. We did take, and they hand-delivered letters to everybody that was adjacent landowners in this property, so to make them aware of the minor revisions to the building that we're proposing at this time. Basically, we're just hoping that we now have the information so we can make that the pond meet the requirements as requested and revote and put this to bed like it was 6 years ago.
So, Ken, let's go back on the drainage issue. On the drainage issues, that's handled in your shop?
No, they actually have to go to an outside party.
But, I mean, they come through those, you look at them, you inspect them, you approve them?
Well, engineering.
You and engineering
Yep.
approve those drainage
Yep.
to make sure they
The
comply
notes and
with
the
all our,
calculations to make sure they comply, absolutely.
with our current ordinances. So we really don't need to discuss the,
No, the earlier requirement was just to bring that back for the.
and we really don't need to discuss the end details of how drainage works, just that we trust that the engineering department has a process and it'll go through that process.
Was there another site plan?
Fair enough,
left,
Shane?
Jill? Nope.
Pull up the site plan, just so if anyone hasn't seen these. This happens to be a space, it's adjacent to the county, there is a residence back there. The one things we always ask is, when the traffic comes in, which way are the lights shining? We want to make sure that if there's any overflow of light, that it's buffered or protected. The garages are going to be on the cement side there. The structure is probably up around the word riprap at Basin Inlet up there, so we're probably safe. Don, you don't have any doors behind it? You're not wrapping a car around the back that would shine onto anyone's property?
Well, first of all, my name's Don Roby. I represent both R&R Holdings, which owns the land and the building, as well as the operating entity, which is Lake Stop 20. We acquired that business about 3 months ago.
The original plan had doors on the backside and several units, smaller units, if you will. So you'd have on well, I guess going by the map there, the southeast side of that building, that lower half would have had units on both sides. We've actually redrawn this such that we don't have any doors on the backside. And so versus having a bunch of smaller units, essentially it's going to be lesser, a little bit larger units. The original plat is, or the original drawing, I should say, is 150 by 30 feet. By putting a little bit wider stall in, we might, if we decide to go that route, might get up to 168 feet. And depending on the height there, that was original plan was drawn at 10 feet side walls. The newer one, if we go that route, we wanted to have the maximum out there, so you're aware of that, with about 14-foot side walls.
And it's hard surfacing that we see in front of there to match the rest of the area.
Whoops. All this area is going to be new asphalt or pavement, whatever.
Okay. For the board members, newer and old, just to remind that storage, any commercial storage is a conditional use in all the commercial zones and in the R3 zone. That's why they come before us every time.
Pat, to answer your question about lighting, the only lighting we would have would be a security light probably on either end of it.
Okay. I believe I did open the public hearing. If I didn't, I just did. Anyone else here to speak on behalf or against the permit?
I have a question for Ken. Are we going to be asked to vote on this today, or are you just kind of bringing it up to speed, or what?
This has been.
I think, yeah, I think we would, yeah, we would vote on it. Public notice has all been delivered.
Yep.
But to be clear, though, the variance that they're requesting is not the same as the building we have from 2009, is that correct?
They're not requesting a variance, though. They're requesting
It's a conditional use.
Ah.
They abide by all the lot. They're not setting the building back or anything. It's just this commercial storage in a C3 commercial zone, which this is still a conditional use. We get an opportunity to look at them all, make sure they kind of fit and comply with the area that they're in.
Yeah, so they're doing everything legal to the ordinance. It has to come to you and say, yeah, I don't see any issues. That looks good. Fine.
I think it's a good use for that property, and it's definitely something that we need out to the lake, in that area out there.
Don,
As far
did
as
you?
the conditional use, I think it's good.
And Don, you hand-delivered the notices for this hearing today?
Well, because we made the one modification on the length that was required notice, I drove over half of Clark County trying to find one of them yesterday morning. So yes, I'd hand-delivered all of them to the houses.
Okay. Were there any issues, concerns that anybody expressed?
Nobody's contacted us.
Okay.
All right, with that, I'll close the public hearing and ask for a motion and a second for discussion.
I'll move.
Motion by Mr. Stein, second by Mr. McGuire. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Final item on the agenda is under old business, and I'm going to put one under new business too, by the way. Don't let me forget. Final item is a conditional use granted. We granted a conditional use on June 18th to allow for construction of a storage building at 446 10th Avenue. And he would like us to consider reconsideration.
I apologize. I wasn't at that meeting when this one went through. I was out of town. I've had a chance to speak with Mr. Edelbrock during this time. And what came before you at that time, this is a C3, R3 zone property, and with storage units which are allowed within the R3 units. They really don't have no intent of putting more storage units on it. They were requested to go to the RZ zoning district so they could do that. Their future plans actually may be to put a multifamily residential structure on this. And of course, if they rezone it under the condition that they have to rezone it to RG, then that's not gonna be a possibility. He said when he talked to the neighbors, he could probably get enough signatures to do that, and if that's the only use they can do, they'll do that. But it was not their intent to see a bunch of garages turn up here with a bunch of junk in the backyard facing 10th Street and everything else, so. I'm requesting that you remove the condition that says it has to be rezoned to to RG district. The use that came before you under the R3 was a conditional use that can't be allowed under that thing. because I think you're restricting the use of the property and
Okay.
a better future development.
Okay, so we had approved it under the condition that he rezoned it to the garage district.
Correct.
And he'd like us to reconsider to allow for the cold storage unit, but leave it as R3?
Correct.
Anyone have any questions? With that, I'll open the public hearing on this. And now, one other thing, we approved one building on a specific size for
It
there.
was either one or two.
He can't change that. He's
Nope,
still,
any
any additional
time he has to
building
come
is still
back to
coming
you.
back to us. So,
Yes,
so what we've done is if we do this, we've now agreed to allow those 2 storage units if he decides to put a 4-plex or a 6-plex up. And if I remember right, there's a floodway in there that he couldn't build a
Yeah,
structure.
there is a floodway over here, but this can be elevated. There's quite a bit of this lot that's easily usable. It's right adjacent.
He
this
owns
is
all
a-
the lot.
He owns all the entire lot, yeah.
So what he's,
Him and his son does, yeah.
this is right across, just down from the City Gardens on 10th Avenue.
Correct.
It's in that low area on 10th Avenue where you go up by the City Gardens and the dog park. Kind of the haunted house used to be up
Tim.
around there. You can see the gardens there up in the upper right-hand corner.
Yeah. There's a
That's
little bit of
floodplain.
Right here that he couldn't build into, but the rest of this area could be elevated and built into.
So he's the sole owner. We've agreed to put a couple storage,
Yeah, here's your
garages
gardens,
up
here's your
there.
dog park, yeah.
and now he may, if we do make him follow through with the garage district zoning, it would handcuff him on putting a multifamily unit there. Anyone have any questions with it? With that, I'll close the public hearing, ask for a motion and a second for further discussion.
I make a motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Arnold,
A second.
second by Mr. Stein. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. First item in new business. We've been asked, currently, Jill, you help me with this. We meet on which Wednesday of the month, first or second? Is that how we do this? We meet in the first half of the month on a Wednesday, and we meet in the second half of the month on a Thursday. Thursday is Board of Adjustment and Plan Commission. Wednesday is only Board of Adjustment. That's handled at noon. The Thursday meeting is at 4 p.m. We've been asked to consider some Plan Commission items during that first meeting of the month, which falls on a Wednesday at noon. I said, I'm open to that, but if we do that, I'd like the meeting moved to Thursday, because Wednesday afternoon is not always conducive for a lot of people, and we move it to 4 p.m. or after that, because some of our meetings as this get an hour and a half. It limits the amount of people that would sit on our board. It would also shorten up our agenda on that only Thursday evening meeting. So we'd be able to touch on a couple Plan Commission meetings the first part of the month rather than handling them all in the latter part of the month. Is that accurate? Anybody have an issue with that? We'd give up the noon meeting.
Pat, if I can make a comment on that, because I think what it would also do, like you say, it would shorten up your meeting, but it would also allow our developers to plan better, and it would shorten up, rather than bringing something and miss a date, then they have to wait a month and a half before they can get back on the planning commission, so.
Yeah,
I
and we've
think it
had
would
people
help our
that have struggled to
developers
get to our
a lot,
noon meeting.
So
We-
they could plan better for this.
Yeah, I think historically, a lot of people can't get off work to get here at noon. It was designed originally when we did it, when only the Board of Adjustment and Plan Commission wasn't going to be the same board, and it was just going to be done during the building season, specifically to help them out. And it's become more, our caseload's gotten bigger, but I'm more comfortable with an late afternoon meeting. If it runs over, it doesn't cause me to reschedule everything I have set for the day. You guys okay with that? That's the direction. Ask for a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr.
An ordinance change, but
Mr. Stein, second by Mr. Dolly. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, motion carries. We're adjourned.
winner, chicken dinner upstairs.
Hold on, we forgot sign code. Tim, you only work 2 days a year. Good thing the sign guy reminded me. All right. I'd like to call to order the Wednesday, October 7th, 2015 Sign Code Board of Appeals. Roll call. Stonebugger, absent. Albertson, absent. Arnold? McGuire? Shriver, here. Hanson? Stein?
Here.
Dolly? We have a quorum. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from August 8th, 2015. Need a motion and a second. Motion by Mr. Arnold, second by Mr. McGuire. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, motion carries. Second item on the agenda is Shoe Carts West Side GMC sign permit 1426.
Yeah, picture in picture. Okay, application was made by Shoe Cards West Side GMC at 1820 9th Avenue Southwest to put in a non-conforming 36-foot tall pylon sign to replace the existing sign on their lot. All public notices were met, and we didn't hear anything back. The only thing that makes this thing non-compliant is the fact that it's 36 foot tall. Everything else, location of where they're going to have it, location of where it's going to be, and size of the sign, all of that thing. They don't have any other issues other than the total height of the sign.
Thank you. With that, I'll open the public hearing if anyone's here to speak on behalf or against the signage. When I read it, it looked like to me personally that they need to put up a new sign. I see that it's a beautiful new sign they're putting up. They want to put up the same size sign as what Sharp Chevrolet has, because Sharp Chevrolet was allowed to move their sign when there was road construction there, which isn't uncommon that we do. Personally, my own thoughts was our code says a certain height. I see no reason that this is any higher. I called you and asked you the Toyota sign that's closer to them than the GMC side, and you told me that was 30 feet.
It is. Yep.
When I went by there, I physically had to rubberneck the Chevy truck sign because I couldn't find it. It's way over in the corner,
Right
mixed up in there. The Toyota sign's further down. There's a Dano sign even closer than that, and that's also compliant.
That's 29 feet tall. Yep.
You know, and I kind of look and went, you're going to open up a can of worms when this thing gets tore up here in the next 2 to 6 years. That we say 32 feet. There's a lot of signs on Highway 212 that are 32 feet or less.
Yeah, this the Travel Lodge or Travel Host or whatever the name of that.
That one seemed tall to
It
me
is.
when I
It's
looked
30,
at it.
measuring off GIS, which is fairly accurate, but it's approximately 35 foot tall. So that'd be 5 foot out of compliance with our present ordinance. The Ramcota one is between 45 and 50 foot tall.
And those are older signs that have been put in before our sign code ordinance. And if they're destroyed by nature, they will be subject to the 30.
This exact same.
The same as the rest of the ordinance. And
Yep.
that's the toughest part of this board is the sunset provision as to when do you say enough's enough, it's over, and when do you let them move it. We've historically allowed people to move signs when there's been construction, on there. We've had some out on by 29th Street and 212. We've had, you try to make it not so tough to people, but to say I want a sign because my competitor has a sign that was put up 40 years ago, it seems to be a stretch, my opinion.
Well, and I think Ken brought up earlier today that for instance, Hy-Vee used to have a taller sign. They wanted a new sign. They cut their sign down and got within our sign code. So it's not unprecedented that we've made people comply when they haven't in the past.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that last sentence? You said it.
Ken said that I was for my time, but he said Hy-Vee used to have a sign
Right.
that was over 30 feet tall.
Right.
They complied with the new ordinance and brought their sign and shrunk the height of their sign to bring it into the compliance with our new present ordinance. So it's not unprecedented that it has happened.
Sign height is tricky. We passed that ordinance, and the other place quickly wanted to put a new sign up taller so it could be seen from further away. Out by the interstate, we see it. We saw RCS Cellular, I think it was over there, tried to raise theirs so it could be seen 2 blocks. They're 2 blocks off the highway, and they wanted to be there. But we're still in the open if anyone has anything to say. Seeing none, I'll close the open, ask for a motion and a second for discussion.
I'll make a motion.
Motion to approve?
I thought we were
That'd be the
discussing.
motion.
I thought we were.
Well, I need a motion to discuss, unless you want to discuss before the motion.
I do want to discuss before
Okay.
the motion. looking at the request here, what they're talking about is these signs that they're getting from the factory, from the GMC sign manufacturer. And it's not uncommon that they come in certain standard heights. Apparently 36, 31, and 26 are the options that have been presented. And he can't get the 30-foot one because he'd be 1 foot over. If he gets 26-foot sign, then he's going to be, his references will be 10 foot shorter than.
He could get the 30-foot one.
He'd have to shrink, he'd put his substructure a foot lower, because it's from grade. So if the pole's 31, I mean, if it's 31 at grade, he could sink his structure a foot below.
Or get the 26-foot one if it's cheaper to build.
And add on
yeah,
and bring
right.
his structure up a little higher. I mean, that's possible too, yes.
Yep.
Yep. You don't have to have a specially made sign necessarily.
Not necessarily, that's correct.
But they are a standard, you're right, they are a standard in talking to the ASI, the manufacturer. It's 26, 31, 36, that's your options, so.
And every business, every franchise business on Highway 212 will have parameters of some sort. Any other discussion before I get a motion? Motion? Motion would be to approve, and then we'd vote yes or no. What they're asking for? Right, if the motion would be to approve 36 feet, if the motion's defeated, then they would just have to put a sign up that meets code and then go up and permit and not have to come back.
Correct.
Now, that's
Correct.
just one sign on that whole dealership property?
Yep,
That's the only sign out there, right?
Yep, the only one they have is this one, yes.
They can put as many signs as the code allows on there, they just choose to put one sign.
Right, they would be
Well,
allowed a second one if they wanted to.
Yeah, I understand that, but the reason I asked that was, in my mind, a 36-foot sign on a major dealership like that, or 35-foot, whatever we're saying here, is different than if you're down the street a half a mile and there's a 100-foot wide lot, business after business after business with a 36-foot high sign. That's a little bit different, because you've got several hundred.
In our sign code, we say how many signs and what's the maximum square footage based on your frontage.
Correct.
There's nowhere in our sign code that plays, let's make a deal and say, I'm gonna put one big one up instead of 3 small ones.
That is correct.
Should there be?
That's up to you guys.
You know, that's the question you're alluding to, going, well, I'm
Right.
okay with a larger sign as long as it's the only sign. So if we were to have a motion to say, we'll give you a 36-foot sign with conditions that it's the only sign on the property.
Well, in my mind, it makes a difference if they came back, and let's say 50 foot away from that sign, 100 foot away from that sign, they want to put up a Delta trailer sign at 36 foot, which they sell Deltas too, I believe.
Yeah.
Well, and it's no different than
and other things, you know.
when Sharps came in and
that's
said,
different.
hey, we now sell for Toyota, we got to put up a Toyota sign. And if they come in and say, they pick up, like you said, a trailer manufacturer, if you say, I'm okay with a 36-foot because it's the only sign they have, then we have to put a condition to make sure it's the only sign they have. And then they would have a choice, put up one 36-foot sign and know that they can't put up a Delta trailer sign. Or stay within the code and they can put up as many 32-foot signs as the
They would
frontage
allow a
allows
second one.
them.
Yep, they would be allowed, they're allowed to on this property if they choose to, 2 freestanding signs.
Otherwise, we're going to have our back against the wall
I think
to
that-
change our
that-
code to a
that
36-foot
gives
for
us,
everybody.
You know, a reason to say yes or no down the road.
Yeah, like Stan made the note, the tough part with that 36 with conditions is how do you know as owners change down the road, it has to be put in the chain of title on that, basically a deed restriction on that property. It gets trickier to track, but I understand what you're saying though, to go, hey, if I'm just gonna put one sign, I'd like as much visibility as I can get, but then it's a 30 and then there's another 32.
I'd rather see a 36-foot sign than 2 signs. side by side.
And I do think the size of your frontage, maybe it's something we should look at, because what we've done in our code when that sign code was made was we said, okay, based on your frontage, you can have a certain number of signs. But the size of the sign was dictated at that time that this is a usual and customary sign. If that usual and customary sign, if those times have changed, but odds are those usual and customary are getting smaller, not bigger.
Yeah,
But it's up to us what we want to do.
There's three things that are with size a lot, you know. The height of the sign is dictated by size, square footage of the sign is dictated by lot size, and then how many. by lot.
So he could have a 36-foot sign if he had a big enough lot.
No, 30s are maximum
Okay,
height.
okay, so 30 is as tall as he can go regardless of the length
Yep,
of your
It's
lot.
20, 25, and 30 are your three.
Then you can get a little taller.
Yep,
Okay.
1,000 feet of the center median in the interstate,
Okay.
you're allowed to go up to.
So he's asking to go 6 feet taller than what our ordinance says,
That is correct,
based on his lot size.
correct.
Well, it's more the location than the lot size relative to the height.
If the narrower the lot, they're restricted on the height of the sign. He's got plenty of.
Yeah, it's the linear feet of the lot that
The
dictates
frontage,
the
yep.
size of the sign,
The
square
height.
footage, and the
Yep,
height.
That is correct.
And the longer you are, the more square footage you can have, and the higher number of signs you can stretch out
That is
across your
correct.
lot.
Yep.
And if you have a corner lot, we have that in our sign code too, as to it
You're allowed a
allows
little
them
more square
for
footage.
allows them a little more signage too.
Mhm.
So if you're in the corner of 212 and 81.
That is correct.
Well, if that ordinance is open for people to come back and ask for variances to the ordinance, if we're gonna consider a variance at all, I think here is a prime example of where I would say it's okay. Because how many highway frontage feet do they have there? Now, if we're not gonna ever create a variance to the ordinance, that's fine. You know what I'm saying? If you're ever gonna approve one, here's an example to do it. If you don't approve this one, don't ever approve any of them anywhere.
Right, or change the sign code.
Or
And
change
that-
the sign
and speaking
Right.
to Pat's point, this board would need to be prepared then for down the road when 212 is widened, that most businesses are going to make the argument that there's an exception and therefore they should be able to have a 36-foot tall sign, 42-foot tall sign, whatever.
How wide's that lot?
It's about 460 feet.
Well, it's a pretty good sized lot. That's one of the larger lots, I would estimate.
I think we have to have
Down
good
there.
rationale at this point, because that comes up. It does on the Board of Adjustment too. Anything that we approve, we have to be able to justify it when the next person comes in.
You'd have to look at the lot size and congestion in that part of the highway, the width of the right-of-ways as to, if you didn't have right-of-ways that wide, they'd look bigger than they probably are.
It's 454.9 feet is the width.
450-foot lot.
How far back off the road is it compared to sharp Chevrolet signs?
Same distance,
Yeah,
it's same
it's pretty
right-of-way.
much at the lot line.
Same distance?
Yep.
Yeah.
I would say that, from my perspective, a sign of 36-foot tall height as compared to the city ordinance at 30 feet, with a lot size that big, it would look proportionate, I guess I would say. In fact, if anything, on the 30-foot size height, it might look a little dwarfed with the,
Width of the
size
lot.
of the lot.
And it might be something we want to look in that ordinance too, all right. I need a motion and a second. Motion to approve from
I'll
someone.
make a motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Arnold,
I'll second.
second by Mr. Stein. Any other discussion? I'd like to say I would like you to take a look for our next meeting, as long as it's not a long meeting, that we do take a look, give us the 101 on sign height versus lot width. And I would say right away. If I have that same lot width but a very narrow right of way, that sign's going to look bigger than when you have these big right of ways like you have here. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I need a no old business. Can I get
Pat,
a motion to adjourn?
I want to go back to what you just did. Did you ask him to take a look
Yeah.
at that, bring something?
Yeah,
back?
yeah, because like Mark said, proportionately, how wide's your lot? How wide's the right of way? If there was no right of way up here, like there's not on East 212, that same sign's going to look a lot bigger. because your door handle is from me to Stanton away. Here, your door handle might be, just out of curiosity, measure the right of way on one side, just from the curb to lot line. That's what I'm getting at. On the other end of 212, it's 0.
Say if you want to go car dealerships, go to Watertown Ford.
Yeah.
Their signs, you could just
Yeah,
about reach
so,
out and hit them.
so that would be an interesting comparison to get a couple visual comparisons of a 30-foot sign close versus 36-foot fine far. I think that's, because we have to, if we approve a variance, we have to be able to straight-faced give a reasoning why. And I think that's a legitimate reason why. It's a long lot and it's a long way from the road.
Just for clarification, then, was your motion to limit an additional sign on this lot, or is this just a freestanding?
It was freestanding.
Stanton said no.
Yeah.
Am I
It was
correct?
freestanding.
Is that the way you felt?
Well, I think I do think it'd be difficult to track, but,
Okay.
yeah, I do.
You know, under the logic that we used in that case was the length of the lot and the distance from the road. And if somebody came on the other end of 212 and asked for the same thing, we'd be able to say, well, it was length of the lot, distance from the road. Where are you in that comparison? Because I felt that's the way that discussion went, was, you know, as Mark said, it would be dwarfed from the road when you look there versus if I was down on the other end of 212. Yeah. Yeah. When I come next week for my building. I need a motion to adjourn.
I'll always move to adjourn.
Motion by Mr. Stein. Second by Mr. Dolly. All in favor say aye. Opposed, motion carries.